If the parents themselves were from abused childhoods, that is their norm, right, of how they grew up and what is their normal family life situations. And that's how they parent their children. And to change that narrative takes a lot of time to get that insight.
Families without social support network, there's no safety.
Okay.
So it is very critical that we mobilize everyone.
Now, in the last 10 years, cases in Singapore involving physical sexual abuse or neglect have gone from around 300 cases in 2012 to more than 2,000 in 2021. Now, that's something of like a 500% increase. And this year alone, several high-profile cases have come before the court, and some of them were very severe, leading to the child's death. So, how do we ensure children remain safe and protected, especially if they are in a challenging home environment? I think that is our discussion for today. And with me, I have Soh Ying Si, Deputy Manager Social Care at Melrose Home, which is run by the Children's Aid Society. And Ying Si spent 5 years working in the Child Protection Service.
Hi everyone, happy to be here.
Yogeswari Munisamy, Senior Principal Social Worker at the Ministry of Social and Family Development. She has over 25 years of experience in this area and has also worked with helping abused children and their families.
Thank you for having me here today.
C. Amutha, Deputy Head of Punggol FSC.
Yes, hi everyone.
Okay, welcome to the podcast. Let's start talking about the most recent case that was in court. It was where a 2-year-old died from abuse and neglect. Now, the circumstances were, well, horrifying to say the least, but one big question is, how could a child go missing for years and sort of go under the radar completely? Yogis, maybe you can start.
So I think for child protection work is very complex, and also detecting child abuse can get difficult, especially when parents sometimes actively choose to conceal. Right? So then even though we do everything that is needed and we make visits, we try to engage the parents and all, but when there's intentional concealing, then it does make it a challenge to actually see the child or spot the child.
Right, and I guess because compulsory schooling in primary school starts only at the age of 7, which means anything before that actually can go undetected. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
In nearly all the cases where the children died, though, were they known to social workers or to the Child Protection Service?
Not always. There may have been some agencies that are involved, and sometimes CPS gets involved at the later stage for some cases. So it could be quite a mixed group of cases.
Okay. Yeah. Help us understand, when we talk about these cases being complex, in what way are they complex? How do you go about addressing a case like that? Amutha? Maybe?
Yeah, I think the thing with child abuse cases is I think child abuse itself can sit in a spectrum, right, in terms of the intensity of it, the variations of it. And sometimes it's a very grey area, especially when it's related to harsh physical punishment, right? So there's a very thin line between discipline and abuse, right? Therefore, we need to take into considerations many things, some of which would include what was the intention of that act, what's the frequency that we're looking at that these things are taking place, what's the intensity of that action itself, or even things like are the parents and caregivers willing and open to work with systems in effecting change or getting the support they need, right? But of course, if we do find out that despite all these considerations, there has been a physical injury to the child, then it's very clear to us on the ground that we need to report it to systems like CPS while they continue their further assessment and investigation.
Right. So let's assume that part has been defined and they do enter CPS. What happens then?
Yeah. So basically, right, initially when we actually receive a case like that, our case officer will gather information, say Amutha refers, will get information from Amutha and other systems so that we get a full picture of what is really happening. Then we will assess. We will also use this structured decision-making tool, which is actually an internationally recognized tool that actually helps us make decisions about whether this case comes to CPS. And we will also look at all the harm and so far what has been the immediate immediate danger as well as the safety concerns in that case. So once the case has come in, right, and we have decided that actually we do need to continue with the case, then we will take on. But there are also times where sometimes we may actually, the family may be ready to safety plan and continue with the community agency, for example, a child protection specialist agency,
Right.
or even an FSC. But when it comes to us, that's when we will actually meet with all the family members. We will also engage professional network and do a detailed safety plan, a safety plan that can actually prevent, address all these concerns that why the child came into us for. And if the family can work closely together, then we are able to then, after that, with safety in place and all, we are able to then refer to a community agency to continue the work. If it is, even with a safety plan, right, it's not possible, then we will then bring the child into care. And sometimes this child may not be able to remain at home, and we might need to then, the child might actually go into alternative care like a children's home,
Right.
a foster carer. But our first choice is, of course, kin carer, the family carer. So that's what happens.
So in other words, you really try and get a full picture first of the
Yes, detailed
entire
picture.
family situation and the
Yes.
circumstances surrounding it.
Yes.
And then based on that, kind of decide what might be the best option for that child, right?
Yes,
Whether does that mean that the child is still at home during this time?
So there are two types, right? One where the safety plan can be maintained and we can work with the family. Then the child remains at home, but we do very regular sighting together with the community partners and to actually go in to also provide interventions. During this stage, some of the children might need to be referred for psychological assessment, psychiatrists and different services. So, but there are also times when, because the danger or the safety concerns are so high and the parent currently was unable to ensure safety, then the child will need to go out of the family for the time being. Then we actually exercise the CYPA Act as well to actually...
What is the CYP?
Children and Young Persons Act.
I see.
Which is the
Okay.
legislation that covers our protection of children and young persons in Singapore.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Ying Si, when the children come to you, I mean, so that probably sounds like they would be in quite devastating circumstances, I imagine, right? And how, I mean, yeah, share with us again, what are some of the considerations when, these children come, and how do you go about caring for them?
Residential care is really the last option. So whereby kinship, there's no available kinship carers, there's no also suitable foster parents, then it will come to the residential care setting. Yeah, so I think often at times, I think the adjustment and the grief and also accepting why they have to be in a residential care setting for the kids and the youths are actually the most difficult. Yeah, because often at times they will also blame themselves for reporting the harm that result them to have to be out of the home. And sometimes they may also struggle like, I'm not the one who did something wrong, so why do I have to leave home and lose freedom in that sense? Yeah, but I think working with kids with traumatized background, we also know that they do need a more structured and consistent setting to also help them in their healing journey. So it's also helping them to journey to be able to understand that this structure and routine is actually part of their healing.
What are some of the ages of the kids in your home?
So we can actually take kids from 7 to 21 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. So our youngest one now in Melrose Home is 8 years old.
At 8 years old?
Yeah.
Wow. And how do you almost... I'm just trying to think, how do you, sort of reconcile the psychology for that child who may be asking, why am I here, why are my parents not here with me? Do they actually comprehend and understand the reasoning behind that?
So one of the things that for children, what we do is sometimes words and pictures, where we actually explain or immediate story on why they needed to come into care. We also do life story work when the children are in children's home, so that there's an understanding of what's happening. But it is very hard emotionally. That's why you see behaviors and all. But we try to attempt to talk to the child about this narrative. Yeah.
And I ask that also because at some point you are hoping to integrate the child back into the family, but the child may not even understand why they left in the beginning. So that's one challenge. And then when you speak to the families, do they also comprehend the reason why their child was taken away? And are they able to come to terms with the steps you are asking of them, to change in that sense before they can have their child back with them?
So those are really very good questions. And one of the things that in Child Protection Office, what we take the approach of partnering for safety, which is really working collaboratively with the family. So even if it means having a mahjong paper on the wall and listing the issues, step by step, because some of our families may not understand things so easily. And also, plus the fact that they may be very angry at the point as well. So it takes a lot of attending to the emotions and working with them. For the children, I mean, at that point you talked about reunification. That's what we always work towards. First, we aim to preserve, and then we work towards, as fast as possible, the reunification, so that, because the research has shown children are best at home, because there's longer term stability as well as their overall well-being in the long run. So we do try to aim for that, but we have to help the parents be ready for this.
Right. But one has to challenge that a little bit, because in these recent circumstances, unfortunately, being back home wasn't the best thing for them. And how do you determine at which point the family is actually ready to, take a child back? How can you be sure? Amutha, maybe, when you meet these families also, is there an understanding of can you sense whether they are ready or not? And how can you tell?
Yeah, so like you rightfully pointed out from the beginning, right? These are complicated, complex families. And there are many things that we take into consideration, and of course the intervention in place, the safety plans in place, and there's some monitoring involved before the reunification process begins. But reality is you can never be 100% sure that nothing is going to happen.
Right.
We just have to make sure we have done enough to ensure there are enough protective factors in place. The parents have enough resources to tap on for support. And because cases are so complicated, and sometimes it takes much longer than other cases. For example, if the parents themselves were from abused childhoods, that is their norm, right, of how they grew up and what is their normal family life situations. And that's how they parent their children. And to change that narrative takes a lot of time to get that insight. I think things are a lot more complicated actually when it's sexual abuse cases.
Right.
That's where, like Ying Si mentioned, the guilt, the self-blame that the children go through. That we need to intervene and process. And when the child goes back to the family, is the family willing to accept the child? Is there still fear, anxiety? So all these things have to be addressed. And then we start that process of reunification. But of course, then there's still monitoring involved.
Okay.
So that we can try as much as we can, but there are also limits to what we can assure.
Yeah, and when you say enough, so that's also hard to quantify, because enough will be different for different families and different circumstances. I know there's a guidebook where it's counseling,
decision-making.
identifying certain key areas, and basically coming up with a plan for the family.
Case plan, yes.
Yeah, case plan. But again, how do you? You have a plan, but maybe your plan is not part of their plan.
Yeah. So that's why I think having a family group meeting is very important, where we actually have all the professionals involved in the case, including kin as well as friends of the family. So they are also offering some perspective, also some aunties, even a neighbor.
Actually, how important is this additional layer of,
Very critical. Yeah. Social support network, right? Families without social support network, there's no safety.
Okay.
So it is very critical that we mobilize everyone. There's no way child protection or even the community agencies alone can do enough citing. In fact, it's always the family members who also alert about things that are happening. Then we can quickly go into support further.
Right.
So, as you said, it is very, very heartbreaking what has happened in these cases. But there are many, many families we have reunified where children are really happy in their homes. And the reunification has really, we have tracked them, some of them over 18 months period.
Okay.
Things have stabilized. Some of the kids we have followed up. They're doing very well. So I guess we should not also move away from the intention of having kids back in the family where it is safe and the parents are able to care.
Of course, there's a challenge between being overly conservative. And also, just in Parliament, Minister Masagos had said how a child be monitored for 12 months. So actually, is this 12 months period a new thing, or has it always been the standard sort of duration?
So generally, basically, after a child is reunified, right?
Yeah.
Child protection, together with the community agencies, will monitor for about 12 months, but also depending on the needs of the family. There are a number that might need even 2 years.
Right.
Yeah. So then the community agency will support. And also when the community agency is supporting, we also tell them if there's any issue, they will use a CAC tool and then just highlight back to us. Then we can go into actually address. Yeah.
So it's not a stipulated period of time. It kind of depends on each
Roughly it's
circumstance.
about 12, but it could go more depending on the need, or some may actually things are really very stable, then it could be slightly shorter.
Okay.
But it's an average of 12.
Right. And Ying Si, when you've seen these children, have you ever felt like certain children should not be returned to their families? Have you ever fought against that, even though by the book it says yes, everything seems to tick all the boxes, but in your intuition you felt otherwise?
Yeah, so I think to add on also, I think reunification doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it usually starts with like it could be just a visit first, supervised by either child protection officers or the home social workers to ensure that the basic safety is established. So then after also a period of time, then we will actually usually progress to supervised outing, which is still like a controlled setting where
Right.
there's a professional to ensure that the parents meet the basic safety indicators. Yeah, before we will actually progress to unsupervised outings, then home leave. Home leave is usually like maybe the child can go back for one night,
Right.
yeah, with a safety plan in place. So like what Yogesh mentioned, that's when the neighbors or the family friends or relatives will come in as what we call like safe adults. They also help ensure that during home leave nothing happens.
Right. So they just will pop in and say, "Oh, hello," and just to.
Yeah.
I see. I
Yes.
see.
So after that, then it will increase, then move towards reunification. So at any point of time, if anything happens, then the case has to be reviewed whether it's suitable to proceed or it has to backtrack all the way to ground zero again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in a way, when a child is returned home, they've gone through this entire process.
Yes.
How long does that take on average?
Some may take longer, some may be about 12 months, let's say, right? Or some may actually take a few years because the parent really struggled to actually meet all the areas. Or even when the child went back home, even for like overnights, then the parents struggle. So we give a little bit more time so that they are ready. Yeah.
And during that process, it doesn't automatically mean that if they pass each stage, so to speak, that they will get the child back, right? Have there been cases where you've reversed the decision and
Yes. So while children have been going home for home visits, and staying on the weekend, and then a sudden family violence incident happened, hasn't happened all this while, and then suddenly happened, then we will definitely review the case and we had to retract back. Yeah.
Okay. So when you heard of these recent cases, I mean, how would that make the social worker or the CPS officer dealing with them feel? Did they feel like they had done everything that was supposed to be done, but yet this one child fell through the cracks?
I think being in CPS, right, generally, everybody's effort is to prevent any kind of child abuse or to prevent any kind of recurrence. But when something like this happens, it is a huge shock because sometimes everything has been in place. For example, the reunification and all. And you've done really everything, And then after that, then suddenly an occurrence like this happened. And you have tried everything to prevent but couldn't, then definitely you will feel a lot of sadness, guilt, and also can feel very traumatized by the event.
Right.
So and then we are also reviewing together. All decisions in child protection are actually not made by one worker, as I said. There's a structured decision-making tool, there's a supervisor, and also review platforms where we actually review cases. So we actually debrief together about what has happened. Yeah.
Actually, it reminds me, I have to ask all of you, because as a social worker, it's a difficult job. We know people do tend to leave after a few years. I mean, like in any profession, I guess. What then? Because you got to know John, this child, really well in 3 years, and then suddenly you leave and he's left with this new social worker who may not know him at all. How do you all deal with that?
Yeah, so you're right. Whether we like it or not, we form certain attachments with these children as well, because these are children who have built trust with you and all that. But you cannot prevent people who are going to leave. So the process, as much as possible, we try to make it a bit more seamless, where the worker prior to their departure would introduce the new worker for at least minimally 1 or 2 sessions to get them comfortable and hand over the case progressively rather than very abruptly, which is why the notice period and the handover period is very, very important in our work. Yeah.
Okay. Is there enough power for those in your position to act on the child's behalf or on the family's behalf? So I ask in the sense that being absent from school alone is not enough to say you need to do something. Even if you met a family who was, and you had a sense that they were being abusive to their children, I mean, at which point can you act? And do you feel that there needs to be more empowerment to, perhaps social workers at this level to do something for the children? Because very often you have to wait until it's too late.
Like Yogesh mentioned just now under the Children and Young Persons Act, I think there are how do you call it? Like that CPOs can also, under CPS, they can evoke certain powers to actually remove the child, even if the parents were to not agree.
Have you ever used it?
when I was a CPO. Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you feel that you had? I mean, felt that you had the enough empowerment to act quickly. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think when you have very clear evidence or suspicion, like not only from your own, right, like what we have been mentioning is also also corroboration with other professionals of
Okay.
what's happening. Then and it's not just made by the CPO, so the CPO has to present to her supervisor and above, like why
Right.
do we have to remove this child? Yeah. Then as a CPS as a whole, they make this joint decision together. And of course, if there are like, for example, issues with the removal process, then that's when we may also call police for assistance.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I also get the sense that very often, sometimes it could be the school canteen operator who notices that this little girl always comes with a certain bruise, and she wants to say something, but maybe they're not quite sure. And are these people reached out to? I mean, when yeah.
Thank you for that. I think in 2021, right, there was quite a lot of outreach and also awareness raising that MSF embarked on. First was the refreshing of the Break the Silence campaign, where the public was told everybody can actually alert, when there is some violence or child abuse going on. We took the opportunity to educate the public about all kinds of abuse and also what bystanders can do. We also created in 2021, we launched the National Anti-Violence and Sexual Harassment Helpline. Okay, that is actually for the public as well as professionals to quickly be able to call this 1-800 number to alert. Then we will go in to actually investigate and support.
Okay. Oh, so there is a 1-800 number.
Yes.
I have to admit, I'm not familiar with that.
I can give you that. 1-800-777-0000.
Okay, so anytime any of us suspect there
Yes.
might be a situation, we can just raise,
Yes.
make a call. It doesn't mean that the family or child will get into trouble, but someone will therefore investigate based on that.
Yes.
Okay, what's the number again?
1-800-777-0000.
Okay. Because reports say that there are over 2,000 cases, and these are just the reported cases. So is it fair to assume that there could be an additional, 10-20% that go unreported?
Easily. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very highly possible. I
Yeah.
think that's where the other partners that we work with, the schools, other agencies who have entry points to these families, can be the eyes and ears on the ground
Right.
to flag these cases or flag the concerns to the necessary parties. And that's an important step. Yeah.
And is there any kind of a centralized database that you all can sort of share so that you know if the person went to this FSC, then went to this other FSC, that, and sort of
Yep.
look at their history?
The FSC sector, yes, we have a integrated system where we may not be able to see the full details of a person who has been attended to at another centre
Right.
because of confidentiality. But we'll be able to see that this person has approached this centre and the date they've done. So if so, we do see a pattern of behaviour or a history of seeking help, and they come through our doors, we will call our partners to find out, hey,
Okay.
what was the help request, what was done for the family.
And they will tell you what happened.
They can tell us briefly because, of course, that is when they come through our doors for help, the first thing we do is get their consent that
Right.
the data may be shared for the purposes of helping them. So they do sign off on a consent to allow us to check these things as well.
Because coming in to ask for financial assistance is very different from abuse, right?
Yeah.
And if you, one would want to know the entire circumstances, right?
Yeah, so we do informed consent. And I think confidentiality is also conditional, and this is made clear from the onset that if there is cause for concern of harm to themselves or to others around them, we will breach that confidentiality clause
Right.
to safeguard anyone involved. Right, so clients who come in for assistance are made known to these facts.
Okay.
And like you said, the underreporting can also happen because when they come presenting on the onset with a family violence or child abuse concern, it's very clear. But sometimes they come in with other issues, financial, parenting. But as we
Yeah.
triage with the family, we
Sure.
engage the family, then you realize all these other
I mean,
things
no one's going
coming
to
up.
come in and say, I'm abusing my child, obviously, right? I mean,
There are people who come and call for help.
Who
and
call, okay, so they recognize. I
and,
see,
and
I
that
see.
we also appreciate and acknowledge that, okay, this is an attempt for them to get help, and very quickly we have to go in and put in mechanisms to support them.
And one cannot help but also ask whether it tends to be certain demographics that are more vulnerable. You know, those who live in rental flats, who may have parents who suffer from substance abuse and things like that. Is there a greater need for perhaps organizations on the ground, you know, FSCs, homes, volunteer groups, to be better coordinated? Do you think that would help?
I think especially there were learnings from all the cases, past history and all, and we've also reviewed and also looked at tightening processes and data sharing, as well as strengthen how we coordinate around information sharing.
Right.
This has really helped a lot. We've set up some systems whereby even after a case is completed by CPS, there's actually like a follow-up in the community, like family service centres, or monitoring, safety check-ins and all, so that we are all having conversations. We also work with like government organisations to set up like a framework for cases where they have challenges citing children. So then CPS or MSF is able to help check with like ICA and police and all to be able to provide information if a child is missing and the FSC or, you know, committee agency tells us they have not been able to cite a child.
Is there a gap now for those who are under the age of 7? Because when you're in school, there are others in your environment to, you know, sort of raise the alarm. But when you're under 7 and sort of mostly at home,
I think what has happened in the last few years is also training of the professionals. So childcare teachers, a lot of them are trained in CARC and also identifying an SSSG, which is a sector screening guide, where they actually, when they observe some of these signs of possible abuse, they know when to alert early. Or if a child is missing for very long, they also have processes to update very quickly.
I think the gap you're saying, if they're not even in preschool,
Yeah.
yes, that's definitely worrying. But if they're known to any of the systems, like the FSC, for instance, for any reason, and we know that there's a child below the age of 7 who's not in preschool, and we are worried about certain possible risk factors that are present in the family, we would definitely encourage and support preschool placement to help and increase safety.
Right.
But if they're not known to anyone at all, and you know, that might be a dangerous situation.
and that is possible now, right?
Yeah,
Especially
and that's
before
where
preschool.
I think neighbours and other members of public who have access to call the hotline, and you know, if they hear child crying every day,
Right.
they can report these things so that an outreach can be done.
There are also others like, you know, Comlink befrienders who actually go to rental blocks to make home visits and all. So they actually sometimes be able to spot. We also have Kids Start, which is for children 0 to 3, which actually works with mothers who are pregnant as well as the children to look at the parenting and further support. And they actually go in for home visits quite frequently. So that's the other group that can actually sometimes see these children.
And they are going out, you know, to reach out to these families, right? Because I think very often any family, it's very hard for them to go ask for help, you know. You may not feel, you may feel a bit ashamed of that as well.
I've also had mosques that do home visits, you know, giving out some food and all this, and they will alert us. So we have been very blessed to have very strong community support and a lot of different partners who alert us.
What are some of the things that would make your job easier or help you help these families and these children better? What do you think would be some of those things, you know?
For myself, there are many partner agencies that we have, like the schools, the hospitals, that may have encounters with these families. Sometimes what happens is when they hear of such incidents or areas of concern, they have to call the FSC, right? Or they will report it to their partner agencies. And that already is second-hand information, and we need to go in and engage the child all over again and build that trust and do that investigation, for the lack of better word. I guess with greater awareness and like Yogesh said, the schools are also being trained to utilize some of these tools so that the intervention can come quickly. These frontliners can then make that first triage assessment and already flag the case without having to go to another person. So I think managers, supervisors, school leaders would then have to support their staff in being able to do that. That would be helpful. But I think what's the bigger picture is really the upstream work or the developmental work that needs to happen so that we do things that prevent us from coming to that incident of child abuse in the first place, right? So I think that's where we have setups like FAM at FSCs, which are centers that work with marriage support, divorce support and counselling issues, not only for families who already have such concerns, but when they are beginning to have such troubles. There are also parenting programs out there, like the Positive Parenting Program, Triple P, which then the resources are there for families to tap on so that we want to do enough to make sure it doesn't get to that child abuse situation in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's important. Yeah.
To reinforce the ecosystem, to build up the family, because if the family is in a good place to begin with, then many of these other things will not happen, further down the line. Can more be done? I mean, but we can't change any of this overnight, and families will always be in difficult situations. If you had a wish list, so-called.
Yeah, I think along the line, like, it takes a village to raise a child. I think beyond professionals, I think everyone, like, living day-to-day life can also be a bit more courageous to also be a voice for these children and youths, right? When they see or they feel that something is amiss, there is the hotline for them to call, or if sometimes even it could be like the child is wearing a uniform, right? They could just inform the school, like, I noticed this child a bit like, he doesn't seem to be coping well, right? So there are actually many channels for even day-to-day people to actually approach to just alert if they do see something that is not right in the public. So
but it's also a bit difficult because we're Asians, right? And we tend to, like, you don't want to be a kepo, so to speak, and there are still people who discipline their children in different ways. Not all of it is wrong. So at which point do you sort of become a whistleblower? Is it?
So I think the reports are also usually kept anonymous. So I think that could assure, like, everyone as well. Like, they wouldn't. I know that CPS don't reveal the reporters. So I hope that's assuring enough for people to actually step up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think reports that come in are very resource intensive, right? Because we need to put in the people and systems in place. But one child dead is one child dead too many.
Yeah.
Right? And every call counts. And like she said, it's anonymous. And that's what it would take for people. And I think with greater awareness and greater accessibility, it is a bit easier to do these things. And I would rather people err on the side of caution.
Right.
Then it's too late for us to do anything.
Because I imagine when these are picked up early, it makes a significant difference in the situation, right?
Yes.
And I think I agree with what they're talking about in terms of really upstream, people coming forward. I think my wish list is that I hope that, all children in Singapore are actually trained in, have sessions of protective behavior. Because that module also talks about, right, children seeking help, also the clarity about what's good touch, what's bad touch, what's unsafe and all. So there's also clarity from the child. Many of the disclosures also come from children,
right,
which is very helpful because then they are fully aware of what's right, what's not, and then they're at least able to seek help. So one of the focus of the program is really emphasizing seeking help.
Right.
Yeah, persistently seeking help. If someone doesn't help you, tell another person, like a teacher,
Okay.
So that's one of the things is my wish list. And I think countering child abuse, and I think the other part is family violence. These two go hand in hand because they sometimes co-occur together. So really, I mean, we are appealing to the public to be able to at least, when they see something like this, to quickly highlight, because we all have a responsibility as a society to actually be able to prevent any child from getting abused.
Okay. I think, thank you for sharing all of that. I think, many of us tend to be a bit hesitant to tell on others. But, I think, as you mentioned, it's better to just say something now rather than wait till it's too late. And we know that no one feels the loss of a child more keenly than people like you who work with them directly. So while the systems may be in place, I think we have to accept that while the infrastructure is there, it doesn't always work, right? Well, I hope our discussion today has given everyone some insight into this. And for those of you who have been listening and joining us as well, we hope that this has created a bit more awareness on the situation so that next time you see or hear something that just doesn't seem right, don't be afraid to just call and to raise the alarm. Many thanks to my guests and to the CNA podcast team behind Heart of the Matter. They are Jacqueline Chan, Jesselyn Tan, Tiffany Ang, Joanne Chan, Saya Win, and Crispina Robert. And I'm Stephen Chia saying bye for now.